Our final section in the fungi is very short. It's a few slides on mycotoxins, or toxins produced by fungi. Mycotoxins can manifest as either acute disease that kind of shows up really, really rapidly, or chronic, which will show up much later after exposure to the toxin. So we can see anything from rapid death all the way to something like tumor formation. We're only going to talk about a couple of different mycotoxins. There are lots more. This is why, unless you know what you're doing, you don't eat mushrooms that you find in the wild, because they produce toxins. So we're going to talk about a couple that are more commonly encountered because they are found in our normal foodstuffs. So again, I'm not talking about the mushrooms that you would go out and forage, because unless you know what you're doing, don't do it. But this is going to be fungi that can contaminate other food products. The optimum temperature for mycotoxin biosynthesis is going to be anywhere from like 20 to 30 degrees. And even though you see here like aspergillus, some of our opportunistic fungal infections can produce mycotoxins, they usually are not going to help the fungus cause disease. Because remember, something like aspergillus, right? It is capable of producing a mycotoxin. And in fact, it's one of the worst mycotoxins known. It's one of the most potent carcinogens. But it doesn't produce it in the body. And it doesn't help aspergillus cause disease. So the optimum temperature, right, 20 to 30, is far cooler than human body temperature. So we don't usually get a lot of toxin production in the body like what we see with bacteria. Bacteria that produce toxins often produce them in the body. Generally, when a patient comes in with a mycotoxin intoxication, it's because they ate something that was contaminated with the toxin, not because they have a fungal infection producing a toxin. So the first group of mycotoxins that we'll talk about are the aflatoxins. These are produced by members of the genus Aspergillus. They contaminate many common crops, including corn, cottonseed, peanuts, and some tree nuts. One of the particular aflatoxins, aflatoxin B1, is the most potent natural carcinogen known. It is thought to activate proto-oncogenes, so it basically will turn on oncogenes, genes that drive cellular replication, and it also can cause mutations in tumor suppressor genes. So it kind of comes at you in two ways. One, it turns on the genes that drive the cell cycle. And two, it turns off the genes that say, hey, something's wrong here, we should not replicate. Some patients can experience acute aflatoxicosis, where basically they develop symptoms right away, and that can result in death. But in patients who develop chronic aflatoxis, that can result in cancer and immune suppression. Generally, the liver is the primary target organ, so that's going to be the type of cancer you would see. Another type of mycotoxin are the ergot alkaloids. They have a common structure of a molecule called lysergic acid. And so the drug LSD was actually discovered because of research into ergot alkaloids and their ability to cause hallucinations. The ergot alkaloids are produced by members of the genus Claviceps, which are grass pathogens. So this is going to be commonly found in contaminated wheat, barley, and rye. There are two forms of ergot alkaloid intoxication: convulsive and gangrenous. The convulsive form of disease is generally associated with the consumption of contaminated millet. Our symptoms here are going to be things like muscle spasms, seizures, and hallucinations. The gangrenous form of disease is generally associated with the consumption of contaminated wheat or rye. And in this case, we can see things like vasoconstriction and tissue necrosis. So ergot alkaloids are thought to be the reason behind the Salem witch trials, that the children had consumed contaminated millet and were having hallucinations. And sometimes what can happen is if a group of individuals are all experiencing things like hallucinations, one of the more dominant personalities in the group can kind of drive the hallucinations of everyone else. And so many people now believe that that is what actually led to the Salem witch trials.